cool.
You know, I always wonder if you're accidentally going to turn the curtain off while we're back here being weirdos.
Anything can happen.
Well, I was just sitting there thinking, like, wow, imagine how amusing people would think if they saw us behind the curtain, trying to get wake ourselves up by like dancing really
Especially
ridiculous.
with your modern dance of many arm movements.
Yeah. Well, y'all, for like the first kind of song that was playing there, if you came in and there was like piano and stuff, I was literally on the other side here going like
And for a minute there, you looked like one of those things that they have
inflatable
out in
arms
front of.
man.
Yeah, whatever you call those.
Yeah, so happy Tuesday. It's Tuesday,
Happy
right?
Tuesday. Yes. Well,
Okay.
yeah, that's why we're streaming.
I mean, I I'm still having that weird feeling that you have between Christmas and New Year's where like you don't know what day it is. I've been doing some cleaning the last couple of days, and like by cleaning, I mean like finding furniture and things underneath piles of things that
Yeah,
you
I'm
you
I'm familiar.
yeah, that you've piled up for a long time. I have
Yeah.
found some interesting things. I have found some unpleasant things. I have found some weird things.
Oh, interesting.
So because of that, it's like I've been in an alternate universe
Gotcha.
of, dust inhalation and things like that. So, but it's
Yeah.
Tuesday. I'm glad. I'm glad to know it's Tuesday. And I'm glad that people are here. More
Yeah.
people.
We've got a full house here. LJ's here. Robin, Tish, Maradim, Jan. So good to see you
And our
guys.
fabulous lurkers behind
Yep.
the scenes.
Our fabulous
I see,
lurkers.
LJ, that I'm rubbing off on you a little bit with your greetings now. That you're coming into the room like, yo. For anyone that doesn't come on to Stephanie's stream on Mondays and Thursdays, I always pop in with like yo peeps because I like to change it up. I like to change it up.
Yeah. And
So
then you and Druid have your special names for each other.
that's true. We do. We got a little something going on there. I hope Druid's around. Well, I did reading today.
I did
Did
my
you do
reading
reading today?
yesterday. I did mine yesterday. Yeah. I
How
realized
did
I was
it
like,
feel
oh,
for you getting
um,
back into the swing?
it felt good. I almost forgot. I was sitting here last night working on some stuff,
Shocking.
and I was like, "Oh my god, tomorrow's Tuesday," and I have not even started because this sat on my desk. I got the book and then suggested that maybe we read it, so I didn't start reading it, and then it sat here for gosh, like a month or something or more.
You've
Um,
literally touched it every single stream we've done because you've
Probably
had
yes,
to
because I
play
hold it up.
it.
But anyway, so yeah, I was like, "Ooh, I gotta read it," and yeah, so I laid down on the couch and I read this book, and
You can read while laying on the couch.
yes, if I'm not too terribly tired.
Yeah, you lucky son of a gun. I cannot lay down and read. I'll be asleep in no time.
Yeah, every now and then there's one of these situations. I'm like, but for the most part, yeah. Oh my gosh, when I was a kid, rainy day, too hot of a day to be playing outside. Oh my gosh, that's all I do. I just lay on the couch and read a book.
I really wish I could lay. The most I can do is like chaise lounge type lay. And yeah,
Yeah, everybody is like, nope. Robin's like,
yeah.
nope.
I mean,
um,
reading period makes me tired.
yeah, I
So,
know my mom always says that she gets sleepy when she reads. Um,
mhm.
but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have a hard time reading in bed unless I'm just not tired. Um, so
Sometimes I'll read in bed to make myself tired, but it felt good to
yeah,
get back
it did. It
in
did.
the
Yeah,
swing of things.
to know I'm reading something that we're all going to talk about. But I mean, I read a lot over the holiday, so
I did not.
yeah, and so yeah, to me, it's just like, oh gosh, one more thing to add to my reading list. But yeah, it's good to be reading this, and it seems like it's going to be a really interesting story. So
I I feel like just in our preface in chapter one, I feel like it's going to be a fluid read. By that I mean not a murder at the quilt show type read, like there's going to be flow and like synergy and like there was clearly an editor of this book.
yeah, I
And
mean, this was published by, was it Penguin Random House? Yeah, Penguin Random House UK was the original.
Hmm.
So yeah, I suspect that the quality of this book is going to be pretty high, and the fact that it's then reprinted for the U.S. means it's been also a popular book. So,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
yeah, I have high hopes for this, and I've already started to see things that cross over a little bit into the stuff that we've talked about,
Sure.
us before as well as on my stream. So it's
Well, yeah,
exciting.
because you're reading the Heritage Cotton.
Hmm. Yep, and
It is
yeah,
it is interesting how well, it's funny. Some people make a very clear distinction, right, between the world of, let's say, quilt textile-ness and like dress history textile-ness, and I don't see them as being completely distinct at all. I see them
yeah,
so incredibly intertwined.
hmm
And the study of quilts for us is the study of textiles, period. And you
yeah,
can't get into anything dress related without also textiles, period.
hmm
So I'm for anyone that might have thought potentially that maybe this was a little outside, I mean, we're one chapter in and we're already talking a lot about the manufacture of cloth.
hmm
And
yep,
that makes me really excited because I'm down the street currently from like the cradle of the Industrial Revolution in
yeah.
the US and textile mills and things like that. Just we were just glancing around at like some of the pictures that come up later and things like that. And I feel like this is going to be far more kind of personal. And everything she's already talking about, I can already picture as to how things end up in quilts and why we
hmm
see a lot of the fabrics in quilts in these kinds of like textile sample books and things like that that
hmm
would have been quote dress fabrics or even interior
hmm
type fabrics, you know what I mean? So
Yep.
I like that roundness of, round and round we go.
hmm Well, and that's why when I got this book, because I guess my interest over the past, I don't know, well, really my entire life as it pertains to costume and historic dress. Um, but I read a lot, and I have a lot of books on costume and historic dress from multiple centuries. Um, about multiple centuries, not the books themselves. They're all from this century or last century. But yeah, I feel like this book kind of crossed my desk because of that intersection of fabric, dress, and quilts. Like, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I kind of saw right away, and especially once I got it and looked at this section in the middle of the color plates, I was like, oh, well, this not only gives us insight into what these women were wearing with a specific date attached, but also this is stuff that we'd find in quilts, and lots of research has been done on the dates of fabric and quilts, but when you can find something from a first person that tells you,
Mhm.
this fabric was bought for my dress in, whatever, 1838, then that fabric is from before 1840. And so, if somebody has dated a quilt saying, this fabric is from 1800, you might question that to say, well, no, it seems like it was a new fabric in 1838. So there's like so much information here. It's a treasure trove, and there's not a whole lot of these things. So yeah.
No, I do like too that she mentions other, but we're getting like
Yeah,
into
yeah, yeah.
like
Sorry.
discussion. Before
Yeah. Sorry,
before we
sorry.
do, let me just
Have announcements.
yeah,
Announcements.
let me let me give the next. Let's see. This is the thing is like we were so anxious to talk about stuff. We're like, hold on. So for next week, which will be the 21st, we're gonna read chapters 2 and 3, which are pages 35 through 63. Hi, Arlene. So
Hey,
glad you could
Arlene.
make it.
Long time no see.
Um,
It's good to have you here.
yeah, we're really just getting rolling, so you haven't missed anything. Um, Also, I was poking around working on the February schedule, and I was reminded that we should be having a guest on the 18th, which would still be our regular night and stuff, but it means we're going to take a night off from book discussion. and talk with Alicia Thomas, who is the director of Virginia Quilt Museum, all about her job as a director and like what the hell is that? Because I don't know about you, but I don't really know a whole lot about what that is. And she said she'd come on and tell us, and
How
as well as
exciting!
all the things that she's done for Virginia Quilt Museum, and they have a big anniversary this year and things going on. So there's that coming up. Stephanie's doing a special something for Galentine's Day.
Mm-hmm.
What's that, Stephanie?
Well, on February 14th, the night of February 14th, 7 p.m. Eastern, I realize it's much earlier in the day for you guys on the West Coast, but 7 p.m. Eastern on Valentine's Day, I will be doing a private stream. So you need to be a subscriber to my streaming channel. And if you're not already and you need some help doing that, reach out to me. You know where to find me. But for my subscribers, I will be doing a private stream of a documentary called Taking Venice, which is about the Venice Biennale. Huge, huge, huge art thing. And it's about the 1964 one where Robert Rauschenberg, U.S. painter, won the grand prize, and how that was the scandal. There's lots of scandal. So, oh yeah,
You want to drop
QuiltCon.
your Twitch? You want to drop your Twitch in the chat
Yeah,
there?
I will. Um, Yeah, Tish, QuiltCon that weekend? I can't remember when QuiltCon is because I'm not going.
Is it that weekend? I'm not going
It's in
either.
Phoenix. Yeah, it's in Phoenix this year. So, yeah, and what I would say about for my stream, my private stream, no concerns if you can't come that night. I mean, some people's husband might be taking them out for dinner. I don't know. Unlike mine. He's over. I'm sure he's over there listening, going, "I'm gonna kill you, woman." But if you do have plans that night or are not able to come, I'll leave it up for a couple days, so you'll be able to come in and watch the replay. So
Yeah, it's just private, so you have
yeah,
to
it's just
be
private. Yeah, you need to be a
invited to be in
subscriber.
one.
So
Hmm.
yeah, it's a special thing I'm doing for my subscribers, and also it's a new documentary, so it got some copyright issues if I stream it in any other way. So
Oh,
um
okay. It's the 19th to the 23rd.
okay.
I'm sorry, y'all, if I seem like I'm a camel over here because I just like realized like, wow, I'm drinking a lot. I had Chinese food for dinner,
I did
and that
too.
yeah, that always makes me super thirsty. But I just realized like I was drinking coffee and now I'm like chugging water. So yeah, so there's that. You're putting your Twitch in, right?
I am.
Okie
Well,
dokie.
if I
So,
there we go.
I think those are like the pressing kind of stuff. We have on the 25th, we've got the Schwenkfelder virtual event coming up,
Hmm.
the Tea and Textiles. That's on our calendar. You'll find a link to it in the last stream that we did. You guys should definitely do that. It's really good. The Schwenkfelder puts on
Yeah,
great
they
stuff.
are really good.
And, our friend Don Ronigan is giving the lecture on scissors, which you could see some of mine in there.
Oh, did you send pictures? I know she was asking for some things from you. So
Yeah, so there's that. And then at the end of the month, we have American Quilt Study Group's virtual seminar that Stephanie and I are heavily involved in. It is open to non-members. There was some confusion for non-members about pricing and things like that. AQSG has since put up a post of a price breakdown. If you were confused, uh, definitely come in if you've been thinking about joining them. I also know that they just put out a discount code. Let me find it. Let me find it.
ooh, I didn't see the discount code.
That was, I think it might have just been posted today. If anyone was thinking about becoming a member, because members pay a little bit less for a virtual seminar, there we go. Um, let's see, join AQSG before February 1st and get a $15 discount by entering code. By entering code WVS 20. Oh, I'm not even typing.
Are you?
WVS 2025. And
There
you'll
we
get
go.
$15 off, which is a good chunk off. That's how Stephanie and I became members. Um, yeah, enter that at checkout so you can join us and get the fantastic prices for members. Um, it's always a good time of year to join because you start the brand new year and then you get, and then you come to in-person seminar, which is in October in Portland, and Steph and I will be there, which I've talked about a million times. So we don't need to talk about that at the moment. But if you have any questions about virtual, please don't hesitate to ask because Steph and I know all the things.
You know where to find
All,
us.
yeah, all the things. All the things.
Yeah.
So I will tell you one thing I'm doing differently, which I only did just because I didn't have my notebook, was I took the notes for this on my computer. Generally, I don't like to do that. The action of handwriting for me ignites my brain a bit. But one thing I really liked about it was I could go back and add things to a particular note
Oh,
later.
yeah.
So I did like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll continue, and obviously it just keeps it a lot more neater and like if I'm writing fast, because my handwriting can. So yeah, so I
Yeah, I know.
started taking notes on my computer. It also takes up so much less space. Like I'm looking at these notes going, wow, this would have taken like 12 pages in my notebook. Um, but yeah, I mean, in the preface here, um, I was immediately blown away just by the fact that right off the bat here we're talking about how this diary contains some 2,000 pieces of fabric.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
I mean,
crazy.
trying to wrap my head around it. I mean, by the time you get through chapter 1, you realize that Anne Sykes is a woman of means.
Hmm.
She grew up and then married and never wanted for anything for sure. So she definitely had, the ability, and working, her family was in textiles. So she had ready access to textiles. But nonetheless, I mean, she made this, I mean, it appears to be the labor of her life. She didn't just like run into the factory and with scissors and so, this was I mean, essentially a diary, as events happened, and she was putting snippets in there, and it's pretty incredible. Um, and the fact that there aren't more of these, it kind of surprises
Hmm.
me in a way, but then again, this is ephemera. This is something that's not, people that made these kind of collections didn't necessarily, well, I mean, maybe they did plan for it to be, future generations to see this thing, but um yeah.
Well, and I mean it makes perfect sense that the one, like you said, she's a woman of means, clearly, because that's one of the reasons her stuff survives. Because
Hmm.
I'm thinking of all the dressmakers, mantle makers that probably did keep scrapbooks like this of their clientele,
Hmm.
but if they weren't high enough in society, then their stuff could have easily been taken up in a fire
Yep.
or
Yep.
left behind or,
Hmm.
this or that, or
Yeah,
just
well,
think about like,
I can easily see people who don't value it for what it is, just being like,
mhm.
"Ugh, it's just a bunch of little snippets of fabric. Like, there's nobody wants this trash, and yeah, any kind of ephemera is very easily consumed in floods and fires and
Well,
just day to day wear and tear and all that. So yes, I understand why we don't have more of these, but I don't know. I mean, it made sense to me when she said the Victorian era, and of course this is pre-Victoria, or I guess, or right, when was, I know I've asked this question before, and I know everybody in my stream always knows. When did Queen Victoria ascend to the throne? Was it 1830 something?
I want to say isn't it like 1837 or something? Because then
Yeah,
she
so
marries
it's
Albert in 40, right?
right. So this is we're not technically in the Victorian era yet, even though what I considered like culturally Victorian. Yes, Victorian era starts when Victoria's on the throne, but the culture of the Victorian era, I always think
I
of
mean,
as
that's more like
later.
1880s.
Yeah, it's later in the when she has been like on the throne for a very long time, and all of these cultural standards have come about, and then
Hmm.
just culturally the Victorianism, I'd say, like for us in the US post Civil War through the turn of the century, is very different than it was 1800 through 1850. I think it was, they're just different, culturally different times.
Yeah,
um
by the end of the century is when like she really has like a major influence. Because we
mhm.
always think when we talk about time periods now that like this one ended and then this one
Yeah,
began, and it's way more fluid than
yeah,
that.
definitely not like that. Yeah, but what I was going to say, this attitude of Victorians love to collect things,
Mm,
and oh, to just say in 1837 to
yeah.
1901. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I need to write that down because I feel like I ask it all the time. Anytime
You know, so
Victoria comes
I have the same problem with like when we talk about Civil War dates and like,
that
those
too.
pivotal.
Yeah.
I've actually considered like it sitting in front of me is just a little bit of wall because I've got a slanting, thing. But I've considered making a little
A chart.
timetable, yeah, of just like some of the really important
Mm-hmm.
reference dates we constantly keep using because
Mm-hmm.
I keep forgetting, especially because we're constantly moving back and forth between talking about actual finite dates and speaking in terms of centuries.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a language swap that your brain has to do when you're speaking like that. But
Mm-hmm.
anywho,
Yeah, that and
I
Tish is right that the Georgian period is the beginning, like that beginning area of the 1800s, and then Victoria.
mhm,
But in the U.S., we also have to think like before the Civil War, they called that the federal period. So
mhm.
Georgian and federal are kind of the same thing, but then Victorian comes in the federal period too. So in the U.S. and in Great Britain, we kind of use different terms for different periods of time, or the same periods of time. So yeah, we complicate things that way too.
Well, and also just the fact that like to consider how much um the British crown still has an effect on the US during
Mm-hmm.
this time period
Mm-hmm.
uh
Yeah.
is is interesting. I So we were talking about the Victorian need to collect things. And one thing that I think is interesting is through reading this, and especially I'm really glad that she mentions other books like this that exist,
Mm-hmm.
other dress diary type scenarios, because it makes you feel a little better that like, okay, there's other things. And she fully admits there's probably more. She just doesn't know about them.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you consider all those private houses and libraries and things like that that
Mm-hmm.
still aren't even cataloged to the public kind of thing. But
Right.
anyway,
Yeah.
so when I was in like fifth grade, no, sixth grade, I don't know, middle school, Hanson was really big. And I was really big into them. I should have looked for like a photograph of my bedroom at the time because every inch of wall was covered with Hanson posters. Every inch. And remember when they had those like teen bop magazines?
Oh yes, I know Teen Bop, Tiger
So like
Beat, Teen Bop.
yeah. So I used to get those and the Hanson stuff in it. I would cut out every single Hanson photo, even from the cover of the magazine, because I also had like my big mirror kind of like bejeweled in little Hanson photos around the edge. And I kept every single article and I put them in a binder like a scrapbook. Now, this binder still exists. And it's in my garage, and I recently stumbled upon it while cleaning out some crap in the garage. And I can remember, I'm pretty darn sure that I like put it in a pile to toss, but I can
I was gonna
remember
say, does
holding
it
on to
does it bring you the shame that it should?
it. So when I hold on to it, I was like, I don't care about this anymore in the sense of I'm never gonna read this again. I'm not like none of this is even all that relevant anymore. Like I'm just not interested anymore. Oh, and it was a Lisa Frank binder. Um, but I'm like, I don't I don't necessarily want to like throw this out just because it was still labor.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Yeah.
had it was a labor of passion at the time. And you know what gave me the idea is a couple other girlfriends of mine, they were two of them together that were making one about Alanis Morissette at the time. And I was like, oh, and they brought it in. I'm like, that's kind of cool. And,
And you were like, well, I'm gonna have to do that with Hanson.
yep. And I think I had another girlfriend that was doing one with NSYNC. Um, am I making you feel old?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
this is when there's like a very clear divide between our generations.
there is. Yeah. But yes, I also did scrapbooky things as a
For New
kid.
Kids on the Block.
No, even that was I was still a little too old for that. My cousin was into New Kids on the Block. She's 7 years younger than me, so but I did do scrapbooky things of stuff I was interested in, not necessarily like a single band or performing artist, whatever, but yeah. And I probably one of my greatest regrets is I threw a lot of that stuff away. when I was like in high school and college, moving out, and I was like, stupid. But now I'm like, oh, I would do anything just to have like that point in time, that one little, like that 4 years of middle school or whatever it was, that, of
So
me.
you're gonna be camp, don't throw this Hansen book out.
Yeah. unless there's nothing of you in it. If it's just pictures and clippings.
Yeah, no, there's nothing about me.
Yeah, well then to me that's like, nah. But if there's your handwriting or anything like that, yeah. If it's just straight up scrapbook,
It's
then
it's just page protectors where I would like put on both sides like articles and.
You never know. You could find the greatest Hansen fan who ever lived and give it to them. I don't know.
But in terms of that, I was just thinking, because some people, I think, some people, there was a moment in reading, especially like the preface and stuff, where, not trying to be judgy, but just trying to be devil's advocate, where I was sitting here going, why would someone do this? Like, why would someone, like, it's not even that she posted in fabrics of only her clothing. Like she, the book here, the Kate said she had found more than 100 names. And let's see, 70 fragments related to men's attire, but only 17 men's names. So it's like, well, why? Now, my first thought would have been, because obviously this is the beginning here, we haven't gotten to like whose book it is and all that stuff. But my first thought was, okay, this person was probably a dressmaker then, or a mantua maker. Like, maybe their husband was a tailor. And like, so that would make a lot of sense, right? That there would be that many people in it. But once we get down into that this book, belonged to Anne Sykes, a woman of means from a textile family. Her father worked in a textile mill and then owned one and got in, he was new money. And then she marries in to more textile related things. You're like, why? I don't, Stephanie, I don't feel the need to document your clothing. So it's like, I was thinking back to my own scrapbook thing of Hansen, and because like, why? And I don't have a reason. You know what the reason is? I big fat wanted to was the reason.
Yeah, I think that, when you think about collectors and collecting, I think a lot of times collectors can't really give you an exact reason why. Certainly there's people that collect things for the purpose of, I know that this collection's going to appreciate. I feel like coin collectors and stamp collectors, like, that's they're kind of like, gotta get them all, but it's really about like the appreciation.
Are stamps
and
worth anything anymore? I don't think they are.
I don't know. That one where they printed it upside down, I think that one's still worth something. But you know what I'm saying? Like, there's some Beanie Babies. People went wild over Beanie Babies because that was going to be a collection that appreciates, supposedly, right?
Wow, yeah, those poor suckers.
But I think that most of the time people who collect, they collect for different reasons. Some people are like, again, like the Pokemon attitude, like, gotta catch them all. They gotta collect a series. And there's that satisfaction of like the hunt and then finishing something. And then I think there are people, which is probably where I fall, is just you've become fascinated by things. They're so interesting to you that you wanna like gather them up and then spend time looking at them.
Hoarding. We want to hoard things we enjoy.
A little bit. But I could see her doing that. I could see her collecting these little pieces of fabric as a way of looking back at, and remembering events and
like early photograph.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And because she did, and thus far we don't know a whole lot about what each page was about, but she's made the point that some of these fabrics were definitely from weddings and what they were to weddings. And so if you don't have pictures of the wedding, then the next best thing is the scraps of fabric to help you remember. You know?
Something that ignites that imagery.
And then I feel like then you get to a point with collecting where you're like, might as well keep going. I always feel like that's what it was. But I think what is most fascinating to me is she went down this road, she went whole hog, but she's not the one who bought the scrapbook, and she's not even the one who put the first fabric in it.
Yeah, Robin said in relation to my Hansen, Somebody somewhere will be thrilled that you created that. You know, if I didn't toss, I could have tossed it. Like when we were looking, I mean, I remember holding it, but if I didn't toss it, okay, I'll take pictures while we're reading this and show you guys, okay? But if not, like I appreciate y'all being like, no, don't toss that. But it like, Steph, it's coming to live at your house.
No, thank
Um,
you.
Tish said, if you Google historic fabric swatch collections, there are lots out there. So yes, but I would put a little like note on there. There are just general swatch books because remember that's how a lot of people sold fabric was with like
Hmm.
swatch books and things like that. Or tailors might just make a swatch book of what they might have available in their shop at the time. So I would say like there's a bit of a difference between just swatch book and like an annotated like memory swatch book.
Hmm.
That's what she seems to think there aren't a whole lot of, and what we're wondering if
Yeah,
there are.
I think where because there are actually lots of interesting types of fabric swatch collections. One that I'm always
Mhm.
fascinated with is the one, it was the Foundling Hospital, where they took a
Mhm. Mhm.
swatch of the mother's dress and
Yep.
put it in there with, you know,
What, where were we hearing about that one again? What, were we
hmm.
reading something with that in it?
Yes, and now I'm
We
completely
get
blanking
information
on
from so many different
it.
places.
I
I
think I
can't
had
recall.
read about that before we read about it. So wherever it was, we read about it. But yeah, so there's lots of reasons why swatches of fabric were collected. But I think what Kate Strasdin was saying, and that there aren't that many. It's the average lady
Mhm.
creating this diary that has fabric swatches in it.
Well, and then Jan
Versus,
said
yeah.
she had time and she needed something to do, which is
Hmm.
a reason why. And
Yeah, and there's that too.
there's that as well. And then Robin said, I've heard a lot of seamstresses creating these types of books of items that they've made. That makes the most sense to me
Yeah, I actually have
as
done
to
something
why.
similar. But it wasn't necessarily like entirely things well, it was all things I made, but I had like a little card box where I take a index card and staple a little swatch of fabric to it and where I got it from, how many yards and how much I paid. And then I have that in a little index box. And then I would go back and
Your
like
collection of fabrics.
for
I'm
yeah,
just trying to think of what that would look
garment
like if I did that.
garment fabrics, not quilting
Oh,
fabrics,
okay,
garment
okay.
fabrics.
I'm
Yeah,
like,
this was specifically garment fabrics because I used to sew a lot of my clothes. And so then if I would actually sew a garment with it, I remembered, I would go back and note like I made this pair of pants or I made this dress. It was a good plan in the beginning. Now I'm like, oh Lord, I don't know. I don't even know where the box is, much less did I keep up with it.
I can't, if I would need a whole other room to house something like that if I did that for my like quilting fabric
It would
stash.
be those gosh, what are those records where it's like they're like on like two big hoops. They're two big hoops and it's like the pages like you have to like go
Oh
up
yeah.
because it's like a binder this thick and it's bound with like metal and you have to like
Hey, LJ wrote like a quote here. The foundling tokens include many mundane 18th century objects, but one type of token predominates, small scraps of textile fabric. LJ,
yes.
what's that
Hmm.
from? Like, where'd you get that from? That's what we can't remember is where it came from.
Hmm.
And Arlene said, I've seen this more for clothing than just
Hmm.
collecting fabrics or
Or
for
quilt
quilt
making.
making.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Well, I think,
that makes sense. And I mean certainly people were getting fabric to make quilts.
mhm.
But
Well, and one thing this isn't talking about is the scraps that she's getting is just one scrap, not the
mhm,
people that would get a whole bag of scraps and then go home and turn that
into something, yeah.
into something. But in
Um,
terms of turning things into things, there's one quote in here that I found um very interesting, and it's on page 4. And it's the decorative handicrafts of women have traditionally been read as acts of leisure, idling away the hours in the domestic spaces affording to the middling and upper classes, and wasting time on inconsequential endeavors.
endeavors.
Yep. And I was thinking like it really solidifies for me that like um that idea that like that 1% has you know caused harm to the rest of the population, in the sense that when they do something, it's considered beautiful and art or lazing away, when the lower classes have to do all those same things, but for more survival type reasons. And
Hmm.
theirs is not regarded as anything other than junk. That's why, again, it doesn't survive, because it was used, and it was this, and it was,
Hmm.
they
Well,
only
and
had.
I would say that it's probably the same too for somebody like Anne Sykes, because granted, again, she's well off, but she's not like, well, was it her, was it his mother? Somebody's mother was in the like the registry of landed gentry,
I only remember that
but
being discussed in terms of her sister-in-law.
maybe that was it was a sister-in-law.
Yeah,
In
it was
any
the
event,
sister-in-law.
somebody in the family I know is like super upper crusty, but for the most part, I mean, again,
That is new money.
yeah, I mean, these
So
people
they
are
worked their
upper.
way
I
into.
would call these people upper middle class. Well, of
Hmm.
the definition we would use today of somebody who's upper middle class. Yeah. Um. Oh, so LJ Googled it. But also Barbara Brackman, Threads of Feeling. Okay.
Yeah, it's got to have come from
Um.
something else too that
It's
might
in,
have been
where I know I have seen the Foundling Museum. Definitely, I've seen it online. Because I've seen
Yeah,
pictures of
that's
it.
what Tish just wrote, the Foundling Museum. So
Yeah,
maybe
that's what I was
we were
reading.
looking, yeah, maybe we were looking at that for some other reason.
Hmm.
I don't remember, or something else talked about where that is or something.
But to kind of bounce off of what you said, all I really had to say about these pages was Mary Delaney and this flower mosaic thing, and the fact that she made these things, and how many? She made tons of them, I think, wasn't it? It was many, many, many of these collages that were flowers, but
Oh, the paper. Hmm.
botanists were still looking at them.
Hmm.
Botanists were like, they're so lifelike, and I mean, this granted, this little black and white picture is, you know, doesn't tell us much, but in glancing at that, I'm like, oh, well, that looks like one of those fancy botanical drawings, that you see,
Yeah.
like, not Audubon, but whoever the people that did the flowers, like Audubon did. That's what that looks like to me. And I'm like, oh, that's cut out paper? Dang.
I
And so
think.
my point here is these women had talent. They had
Mhm.
skills. Um, and, that this stuff was looked at it as like, you know, just the things to keep them busy.
Well, then that's what I mean. It's like, um, this this attitude. I mean, God, we talk about this all the time with that argument of like quilts being art versus, use. Um, and it's more account for why so much of our contribution to the history of humanity has been just overlooked, cast aside, undervalued, and it seems every example, like this dress diary that we end up coming up with, just becomes one more reason someone used to discount it. And I often feel, and I'm not upset about it, but I often feel like it's always has to be women that be like, "Hello, look over here. This is important," because, heaven forbid anyone else find it important. And like, on the one hand, like, I'm really glad that women are doing that, but on the other hand, I'm annoyed that women have to be the ones to do that. And like,
Hmm.
other people
Yeah.
can't be like, "Wow, that's really awesome." Like, that's just a personal little rant.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean, absolutely. And again, the point is that got to keep women busy, and if it's not with all of their big pile of housework and things with the middle and lower class, well, we got to keep these fancy ladies busy too, because God forbid they might want to vote.
or their mind would be corrupted,
Yeah,
by
yeah.
the
So,
devil, because they might want to have sex. Like,
yeah.
I did just make a little note in here to remind myself, um, well, actually, two things I'm going to say. Number one, the flowers that you mentioned. The Harvard art museums and history museums, they have a bunch of them. They're really very good if you're ever in Boston. They're not expensive to get into. They're open, I think, for the most part, normal hours. Anyways, they're I think it's called like the Natural History Museum or something like that. Most of the Ivy Leagues have one. I've also been to the one at Yale. I think they actually have these things. I don't know if they're hers.
You mean Mary Delaney?
Yeah, but I do remember when I was there years ago, seeing these paper flower type things, um, in like the exhibits that would include like rocks and minerals and, precious, semi-precious stones and things like that. And this reminded me of that. I was like, I wonder
Hmm.
if I was looking at her stuff. I don't know. Or someone that maybe trained under her. I'm not sure. I'd have to like look into it. But it just reminds me of if you are in and around one of those like Ivy League natural history museums, they have really awesome collections of
Hmm.
stuff. And
Yeah.
we should not discount those museums. But on the flip side, on page 8, it does mention mid 19th century New Englander Anne Eliza Cunningham kept a sewing diary. Um, and I had made just a note of that because I was like, oh, I wonder if I have come into contact with that anywhere in other books, and I should keep my eyes open for that. Um,
Yeah,
just
I
saying.
definitely was looking at these going, oh, the Brooklyn Museum. Uh-huh.
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
Hmm.
All these East Coast resources here.
Hmm. We're
um,
so spoiled.
yeah, we really are. So let's get into the chapter about Anne. Um, so I really appreciated her explanation of, transcribing longhand. Um, because and I agree, it gives you so like transcribing. I hate. I have done a bit of transcribing, particularly, with texts that
Hmm.
have been, written and did, in the process of digitizing. And God bless the OCR software, the optical character recognition software, but OCR has a hard time with handwriting. And so, a lot of times human beings have to get in there and look at, and anything that's been translated by a machine and or a human being has to do it from scratch. And that process of writing it out longhand, I think it does help kind of make some like connections in your brain, because you'll look at it and you're like, I have no idea what that word is, but as you're writing the rest of the sentence, you're like, duh, that's what it is.
Yeah,
And
like
I
your hand will provide context clues.
yeah, and I think that is easier than trying to type it out, which is primarily how I've transcribed. um and where was I going with that? Oh, the fact that it took her so long to figure out that Anne Sykes was the owner of the book was interesting to me, because we get to a point in chapter 1 where she mentions Anne kind of early in the book. And so I don't know if she looked at it and saw the name Anne and just thought that the owner of the book was referencing somebody named Anne, whereas
Hmm.
she realized when she got to that Anne Sykes piece, that she realized Anne Sykes was the person. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, how often did Anne appear? It probably quite frequently, until she put two and two
Yeah.
together and realized that Anne was talking about herself.
Well, I mean, and she says, that the reason she didn't think Anne was the owner or the creator is because, like you had already said,
Hmm.
that the first entry in the book is not created by Anne, it's created by her fiance
Hmm.
before they get married, and he gives her this book. So Adam Sykes is Anne's fiance. Their wedding is the 20th of September in 1838, and he pastes in uh remnants of their wedding clothes with notes.
And that to me was so fascinating, because, I mean, no offense to my husband, but he wouldn't have thought of something like that.
I would say in this moment, like, lots of offense to your husband. But no, I was literally like, for this time period, that sounds so incredibly romantic.
It really does. It does.
Today we'd probably kind of be like, all right, you weirdo. But knowing what we know about this time period, about courting, about how relationships form and things, because the one note that I made in regards to that, and it doesn't have any bearing about Adam and his wife and things like that, but this idea, because at the time from other context clues in the writing, is how women, I mean, and actually still today, some people, but they view their life as not starting until they get married.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's considered the beginning of their life.
That's the beginning of adulting.
Yeah. Which I mean, in one hand, it's like, that's really kind of sad, because it's like saying that a female's life holds no value until she's married. And we do know that, like, culturally, like, that's a thing.
Yeah.
But I to have your husband come up with the idea that you should, now I don't want to know what his idea was. Maybe his idea was just, here, this is just to scrapbook anything in your life, and we'll just start with our wedding clothes because that's the most significant, start of your life. To us now, we do baby books,
right?
And things like that is the start of your life. But whatever his motives were, she obviously found it just as meaningful to continue this out.
Well,
for her, like, entire life.
And what I kind of wonder there, and Arlene, your question, yes. Did they say he may have been in the textile printing business? I think he was an illustrator. He was
quoted as a, quote, designer.
Yeah. And for whatever reason, I kind of thought that meant, like, well, illustrator, but deciding where the little sprigs and the dots are going to go, right? And then I think it was his brother that was, and I'm blanking on what it was. He had a printing. I think his was printing, or was it a mill?
His brother was in the printer, and that's where that other lady that's in the Berg's Landed Gentry comes from.
Yes,
his wife.
Jenny. Ah, crap. What was her name? I just read this last night. What is wrong with me?
I wanted to say Janet. It could be Jane. It's a J.
I think it's J. It's definitely a J.
I don't know if I wrote
yes,
her name
and so
down.
what Robin says, I
Jane.
think it came, Jane, okay. Robin says it came easy to him because his father was in the textile business. Yes, and to me, it maybe his choice of the wedding clothing, instead of, say, I don't know, penning a beautiful poem or pasting in some kind of paper thing or whatever, that maybe the clothing had this, or the fabric scraps had this significance to both of them because they were in the textile business. Also, perhaps those fabrics came to them through, having the gown and the suit of clothes made. They could have come through, the family. So
yeah,
and I suspect, I mean, that's probably where his head was at, was like, we're textile people. Of course, this makes sense.
I mean, yeah, they definitely would have shared that. I'm going to say interest, because if she didn't find it interesting, she would not have cataloged the textiles of, like, people in her life. And it also had said, like, she was obviously very close with her sister-in-law, Jane, because she shows up a ton in the book. And at one point when the census comes through, she's staying there as a guest, and she was widowed pretty early on in her marriage. So,
well, because Jane's husband was 1 trillion years older than her.
Well, yes, she was widowed 3 years in, and then she would have had, I mean, she never married again, which really tells you something. But she would have had all the time in the world then to visit with her sister-in-law and her and stuff like that. So why wouldn't you?
Yeah. But I found Adam very charming. Also, Jan.
No,
you know what? And again, I know we're at the beginning. I know that we don't really know anything about Anne yet, but I don't know why I kept thinking of Tallulah and her husband. Just like two peas in a pod, and they got married, and they loved each other, and just
why you're thinking about that is because we don't hear stories like that super often.
No,
so you're gonna let them out.
And granted, I have friends who have done just incredibly touching things for each other around an anniversary or wedding. And my husband was very cute when he proposed. I mean, it just, people do things, but also you hear less and less. You hear less and less about, like, just I don't know. I feel like you hear a lot of over the top stuff, and then you hear the kind of stuff like, yeah, well, my husband proposed to me over the table at, like, Applebee's. You hear stuff like that, and you're just like, Aw. But this just, the way she described, he went to this, maybe he went to the stationer, and they put out a sort of array of books, and the marbling was very in vogue, and he chose this one because of the colors. And then I'm very curious about the cover on it, but we can get to that later. Yeah, I don't know. It's just it all is just so romantic, and it's like, yeah.
Because well, and later on then too, they spent, her aunt's husband didn't die super early. They spent 50 years together. And I was thinking about the fact that their marriage is in the Victorian period. They basically can almost mirror Victoria and Albert's marriage, because they're married in 37, Victoria and Albert married in 40. And I was thinking about that quote from Albert that is, a love like ours can burn down a city.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, and anyone that needs to feel that they're like honing in on the time period, go watch Victoria. It's a masterpiece series. It's really good. It's got Jenna Coleman. Love it. And watching the time here I was thinking like, oh, there wasn't as much in this chapter that I really felt we were going to get like into, but I wanted to give a little anecdote that I thought you might find kind of cute. Now on, let's see, 25 to 26, we're talking about Jane Sykes, Anne's sister-in-law, with her leg of mutton sleeve on her wedding dress.
The giggle sleeve.
Yes.
Yes.
So here's the anecdote. There's a scene in Downton Abbey where the Dowager Countess, played by Maggie Smith, is talking to her cousin Shrimpy and his wife Susan about Lady Rose's dress that she's wearing, and Mom Susan is really upset, and she's like degrading her, and doesn't she look like an S word, an S slur? And the Dowager says, in my day, I wore the bustle, the crinoline, and the leg of mutton sleeve. I'm not one to criticize. All this time, Downton Abbey's like almost like what, 10 years old now? All this time, when Maggie Smith says that line, I thought she said the leg of man sleeve.
Okay. And what would that in your mind look like?
Like leg o man. Like the word Lego man.
Oh, I see.
I've never seen it written out until this book.
Okay.
And then realized it was the leg of mutton sleeve. It was literally the look like a leg of a like mutton like yeah, I thought she was saying the ligament sleeve. Like I was like, like it was someone's last name. Yeah. So I was like, oh, she's talking about a sleeve that looks like a leg
Of mutton.
of like mutton. Yeah. Like, oh. And now when I think about it, I was like, did a man make up that name? Like, who's going to describe that? And look at this beautiful, leg of dog. I know a mutton's not a dog, but you know what I mean? Like, this leg of deer, venison, on this.
I would be very curious, honestly, with the leg of mutton sleeves. I mean, they had to wear capes, because how are you going to get that sleeve into the sleeve of a coat? Like,
oh yeah, no, actually, it's so
and
funny.
they actually, some of them, they stuffed them, and they had these little, they look like water wings. So it wasn't just stuffing, but it was like a little band with a poofy thing you'd wear around your arm, and then put the dress on over it to keep your your legs of mutton puffy.
Yeah, like, I wish they'd bring back capes, because if there's one thing that I notice, Stephanie, since you've been out with me in the world, you almost will never see me wearing a winter coat unless it's really frigid outside and I'm like cleaning off my car, because they're so like, imagine that kid from A Christmas Story who's like can't put his arms down. That's how I feel in like winter coats, because I'm wearing like a sweatshirt or a sweater, and I never drive a car in a winter coat. I always take it off if I have one on.
Yeah, you get hot.
I feel so constricted, and then Sunday and I were talking the other day about winter coats, and we were both like, man, I wish they brought back capes. Because there's just so much more
Yeah,
fluidity
they are, and you
in
can kind of
there.
wrap it around yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, like, so,
Yes, all the
anyway.
fabric indeed weighed a ton. All that stuff that was pleated, those skirts. I mean, that was the purpose of corsets. Was for, the corsets pulling you in.
So you didn't fall over while you were wearing stuff.
I mean, it's like the weight of the skirts and the petticoats will dig into your hips. And instead, you have them on the corset. And so the corset is taking the weight and the strain, and it's not digging down into your hips. So, yeah. Vest and scarf all winter.
Yeah, I just like live in like sweatshirts and stuff like as much as I possibly. Now, if it's frigid, that's a little different, and I have to go outside and clean my car, and then I'll just like walk out there like this, like in the coat, like clean off the car.
I have to say, I enjoy a goose down, so I've got a goose down coat, and it very, very soft and warm, but also not very heavy. So,
well, we also don't make them like for women, like. There's only particular kinds of coats we make now that like cover your bum. And I don't know about anybody else, but like my bum gets cold.
Oh yeah, my goose down is like down to my knees.
Right, but then it's still a very constricting coat. It's so close. Where I'm like, if you had a cloak, it could come down to your knees or longer, but it's still not restricting.
Just flip it, or you do that thing that the swashbucklers did, or the what do they call them? I can't think of the word they call them, but they swing it around to the one shoulder. You could wear your cloak in any way you want. I like a cape. I got to be honest. I like a cape.
Yeah, maybe we really need to like get on board this like bringing back of the capes and stuff like that.
All right, back to the book.
I mean, I think let's see. One important thing. Well, actually, I've got two more things. One thing is I find it interesting. I am definitely part of the group here that thought that our modern day, white wedding had a lot to do with Victoria's wedding.
Yeah, and I had read recently that was not true. So I was under that impression too. I mean, it just was that anecdote followed us around. But I mean, I think there is some truth in it that she really made it popular, but people were definitely wearing white dresses before then.
Sure. But yeah. So, and just for anyone that hasn't read or hasn't gotten, the thing to discredit this in this book here is that Anne's wedding is in 1838. Is it 1838 or 37?
It's 38 because
38.
Yeah.
And she, from her dress diary, wore white to her wedding.
Yeah.
Before Victoria had done it. And then the other thing that I thought interesting, just because I know a little bit about this, but not a lot about it. And we talk about it a lot more in terms of quilts that you make ahead of time to go.
The trousseau.
Yeah. And also I thought that word meant something totally different, like all these years. So on page 29.
Yeah, and this is where I have some stuff. Yeah, I have some stuff noted here too.
Yeah, this trousseau, this bottom drawer, so called for the storage of garments that would be needed in your future. And I especially noted that aside from making them, you could also buy a complete trousseau.
Yes, that was
pounds that contained 86 undergarments.
I know. Well, 86 items. So chemises, drawers, corsets, crinolines, and vests. Now, to me, trousseau, and this might be where your mind was at. I mean, here in the U.S., I mean, certainly we read about the quilts. What is it? It's 11 quilts, and your 12th is the bridal quilt. Like all that kind of old wives' tale stuff. But I always looked at it as you're going to put together your sheets, your towels, your whatever.
Your linens.
Your linens for your new home. Like, that's where I always looked at as the trousseau. The dowry being something separate and different, but that the woman is going to come in with all this stuff for the household, and that's what the trousseau is. I was very surprised to see it's like, and to some degree, like nightgowns and lingerie too, because you're no longer a little girl, you're no longer a young lady, you're now a woman and gotta wear a girdle.
Yeah, now you're a woman. We spend all night laying around in lingerie. Like...
Well, no, you got to have your girdles and whatnot. Your husband should not have to buy your girdles. But, I mean, they're saying in preparing a bridal outfit, it is best to furnish the wardrobe for at least 2 years in underclothes and 1 year in dresses. So that's part of the trousseau. And that surprised me because, I mean, I guess on one hand, I'm understanding it as, you know, these are, again, people of means, and you're going from your old life into your new life. And of course you should have all new clothing for that. I mean, but I see what she's described here as, again, being like that upper class standards. You know, I can't imagine a lower class woman going like, oh, well, I'm going to build my trousseau of all these new clothes. Like, no, you're going to take the clothes you had at your dad's house and you're going to wear them in your new house.
You know what's interesting though is like this idea of spending, quote, like years making this. Now I can see the reason that you need to spend years making your quilts, because those take a lot of time. It's a lot, you know, making a pair of drawers is a lot quicker than making, you know, a quilt that needs to be quilted. But I always felt like, because it's not that only the upper crust is going to do this. Obviously lower class would do it to a smaller degree, but I would think that would be one of the reasons it would take years, is because of like your means to purchase or to create things. That's always something I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, like, and maybe that's the division. What is included in your trousseau? You know, if you're a poorer or you're a lower class person, you know, I mean, you're going to do your best to bring, you know, quilts and sheets and linens and things like that if you can, as much as you can.
I feel like those people, and again, this is totally conjecture. Like, I'm not, but I would think based on how we talk today in terms of class divide and what people have or treasure or things like that, I would almost feel like the quote lower classes would be the ones that would really make sure they have like that just for pretty quote, you know, or that one garment that's really special, as opposed to 86 undergarments of
exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's my point, is that they're not going to have a trousseau with like all this stuff in it. They're gonna look at it as like, well, maybe one nice set of whatever lingerie looks like then. I mean, I know what it looks like, but you know, those oddball pieces we don't wear anymore.
Yeah, what was Fredericks of Hollywood like putting up then? I
mean, they didn't wear drawers necessarily much back then. But you know, the chemise and the chemise cover, or the corset and the corset chemise, like all that kind of stuff.
Whenever they like go on this long rant of labeling all those different kinds, I'm waiting. I'm gonna be like totally like scandalous right now here, y'all, but I'm totally waiting for. So the chemise and the crinoline and the this and the this and the nipple clamps and the this and the this. It's like, I'm just waiting when we hear like, what was her name? Who was that lingerie lady? That was really like the one. She was in the 1%. She designed naughty lingerie for. She was on the Titanic. What was her name? Oh my God. Lucille? Was it Lucille something?
Yes, her first name is Lucille. I have her book on my shelf over there, and I actually portrayed her in a Titanic thing. And
all right, now you're a super loser then that you don't know.
I don't remember her making scandalous lingerie. I remember her making like,
but it was scandalous to like them, like at the time.
She also made dresses that were like ready to wear of the time period. So
but that's what I mean. Oh my God, what was her? Somebody look it up. What was her name? Oh my God, what was her
name? I did have a thing on my bulletin board behind my computer, if I can see it. Lucille Duff Gordon.
There we go. Oh, thanks, Robin. She said it like the same time.
Good job, Robin. You get a brownie point.
Yeah, so like we do know that there was a concept of like lingerie.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, well, so again, talking about this, so we talked about the trousseau, we talked about this idea of coming with you know, these different things. Oh, they did say the English Women's Domestic Magazine, by reducing the number of articles and having 6 instead of 12, you will arrive at something suitable for your income. So again, that idea of like, I don't need a dozen dresses. I can't afford a dozen dresses. I'm going to have like one really nice dress and maybe one or two, and then I'm going to bring all the stuff I've been wearing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know. I think of it like, I guess the best way I can think of it in today's, today's mindset would be like, a very rich person going on like a cruise to, say, the Mediterranean, the French Riviera, whatever, what could splurge on like all new vacation clothes and all this stuff, whereas a person who's like been saving all their life for that vacation is gonna go like, all right, I gotta economize here. I'm gonna, I might buy a new bathing suit, but the rest of it's gotta come from the clothes I've always had. So I mean, that's just kind of the way I think about it today. It seems like it was probably the same thing. But what I thought was really interesting was on the next few pages, 30 and 31, talking about weddings. And, I truly did not know that they often were married before breakfast.
You didn't know that?
Yeah, I really didn't know this. And then, that then there's this wedding breakfast. I was like, huh.
Have you not seen Downton Abbey?
I've never watched Downton Abbey, no. I've told you this. It's on my list. I just never have the time to do it. And I don't know why. I think when it first came out, I was not in any position to ever watch TV. And I didn't have any way at that. I think at the time it was out of recording it. Because it was PBS, right? In any event, I've just never gotten around to it. I will. I promise I will. But the other
for
one,
the clothes alone.
I know. And page 31, where they talk about the bridesmaids' dresses, says photographs of later 19th century weddings often show a disarming similarity between the dress of the bride and that of the sometimes numerous adult bridesmaids. And of course, it goes on to talk about like the reason why attendants, historically might dress the same way as the bride is to keep evil away from the bride. And I suspect that there are other cultures that do this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Maybe not in modern times necessarily, but more in recent history, that it's this idea of like protect the bride. You've got these like the bride's ladies who are gonna like, fend off the evil.
And the evil being like her fiance's other mistresses.
Or the groomsmen. But can you imagine today if somebody had their bridesmaids wearing a dress identical to their I mean,
well, because look at the shift we've made where like, before it was like, look similar, don't draw attention to the bride. And now it's like only draw attention to the bride. Mm-hmm. All of the attention to the bride.
And yeah, we also, I mean, just in my lifetime, the trends of, you have, 3 or 4 bridesmaids and they're all wearing this identical awful dress that they can never wear anywhere else again in a color that is not suitable for
you want to make them look like crap.
Yeah, because you don't want the bride to have anything drawn away from them. But to today, when you have like maybe, my cousin's wedding and her sister last year, it was like, I want you in my wedding. Here's the color your dress has to be. We have this wedding registered with like David's Bridal or whatever. Go pick a dress that flatters you and that you'll wear again, but it just needs to be in this color. Again, like this just what matters to us at a wedding, but the thought of like 4 bridesmaids all wearing bridal dresses is just hilarious. And think about how many am I the a-holes where people are like, my future mother-in-law showed up wearing a white dress that looked surprisingly like a wedding dress. What should I do?
Well, that gets into like crazy...
maybe not marry into that family.
Yeah, crazy boy moms. I will say, have you seen the show Victoria?
I'm familiar with it. I think I've seen one episode, but
so when they depict her wedding, she actually in the show decides to have her wedding in the morning, even though I forget what his title was, but the guy who she's planning it with is like traditionally royalties married in the evening so that the court can put them to bed,
Yeah.
And she was like, no, I want to have a wedding breakfast. I'm going to have mine. But anyways, so they show pictures of her wedding when she's walking down and her bridesmaids are dressed like her. Mm-hmm. Like wedding maidens. They're significantly younger though, so it actually looks a little creepy. But stuff like the things like that I like about some of these PBS shows is they do actually pay attention to history, and at least with Victoria, they have all of her diaries.
Yeah, and with her, she was wearing like a crown of flowers, right?
Yeah, she
Which
decides
was
not. She decides to depict
mhm,
herself solely as a
mhm.
bride that day and not as a queen.
Yeah, but
She even says
the
in the
crown of
vows.
but I think even the crown of flowers was kind of trendy. Like she was,
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm.
But what were you gonna say about the vows?
She even decides to say she will honor it and obey, even though they're
Yeah,
like, you should leave that out.
think
And she's like,
I
I'm a
think
woman.
I think that was generally in the lexicon, even when I got married, and we did not have that in our wedding vows. But, um, yeah. So what Robin said: wedding usually at 9 and breakfast at 10. Yeah. So your
I
wedding
don't even.
brunch. I love a
I
wedding
don't want
brunch.
to get up for a wedding at 9. Like, let's see, the weddings I've been to, I have been to some morning weddings, like a Greek Orthodox, butt
Hmm.
crack of dawn wedding that lasts.
I believe the Amish have weddings like that too. Like 9 a.m. on a Wednesday. You doing anything? Nah, you're coming to my wedding.
And the wedding was like 2.5 hours, high mass.
Oh yeah.
I've never been to anything like that before. Uh, and then after that, we had to drive like an hour to the hall for a reception that lasted like 5 hours. And a lot of people got lost. It was funny. That was before the GPSs that we have now.
Yeah, we had a similar
Um,
kerfuffle at my wedding because we had a lot of people coming in from out of town, and we had written directions that went in because the church and the rehearsal or reception
the
place
hall.
were not they weren't close together. So yeah, the directions to the church for all the people coming in from out of town, and then literally the week before the wedding, they changed a traffic pattern because of some emergency road situation, and so a bunch of people were late to my wedding. And I just felt so bad. I was like, oh my God, because there's nothing more frustrating. In the winter, it was December 31st, and nighttime, trying to navigate in a town you
Wow.
don't.
You gave them no chance. Like you were like, how can I make this wedding as difficult as possible for everybody coming?
Yeah. But speaking of ephemera, wedding ephemera, on page 33, I think this is really what's stuck in my head, where it says, where later brides and guests could recall a day through photographs, this silken ephemera was a material reminder of a special moment in time. So I really think, I think that she's on to something there, it's not just about, collecting a book full of fabric. It's about documenting. And you think if this woman had a smartphone. Or if she just had a camera, period. She would have been scrapbooker extraordinaire. She would have had piles of the family scrapbooks, or her phone would be bursting with pictures. I just suspect she's that kind of person. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I had put something aside for us to peruse.
Yes.
Just in case. Do you want to look at it now or do you want to save it?
Well, I would like to look at it now and give everybody the link because it is
Okay.
pretty freaking awesome, I gotta say.
Okay.
So bear
All right,
with
let
me
me.
a second.
Are
I
you?
can pull it up.
You want to share or do you want me to share?
Um,
Because you have to put in the link for
yeah,
people.
I think I can share it. I'm gonna do
Okay.
this, but hold on a second. And I'm gonna share it so you have it too. Now I put us over here. Okay. Does that look right, you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're
Oh,
off
I was
screen a
gonna
little
say, it was
bit.
there.
All
I was gonna say,
right.
you usually have me share because it takes up the
Yeah.
whole screen when you do it.
I think I've got it. I think I've got it working better. Oh, I see why. I see what's happening here. Yeah, I can't change that, but I think we see enough of this. We can switch over to you. We can switch over to you if it's not enough. But so you found this. Tell me about it.
So we just got, it's funny. Do you remember all those times that we look at something and then something else just falls in our lap? And online on a lot of the Facebook groups, this was shared in a couple of Facebook groups. One of them was called Antique Fabric, Another one might have been this is one of the Six Know-It-Alls groups. But yeah, this is a swatch book kind of album thing by, Annie Hayslip.
Okay, slip, yeah.
Uh yeah, and it's owned by Colonial Williamsburg, but the great thing is they've digitized it.
Yes, and I
So
didn't
we can
realize.
look at the whole thing.
Yeah, we were already streaming before I realized that. I was like, oh my god. First of all, the book itself is very cool because I mean, look at this cheater print. I would do anything for a piece of that cheater print.
Well, and this time period is the same time period that we're looking
Mm-hmm.
in now. So half of me is just like, could this potentially have been one of the books that Adam would have chosen from?
Could be.
Could he have been looking at something like this? Could,
Yeah.
um, and it's not exactly the same in the sense of like it's
Yeah,
not
it is. It's not.
annotated the way that, Anne's book is. But I feel like we do see far more kind of swatch book type things like this one,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like what's in the pages. And we can certainly come back to this, throughout. Um,
Yeah, for some reason it is not letting me. I don't know if it's because I'm sharing
it
it
won't
or
let you
what.
click on the pictures.
Yeah, like I can. Yeah, it's like it's scrolling through the pictures, but it's not pulling them up.
All
Let
right,
me
well, why don't you just get out and I'll get in,
let me try to
and we won't
let
fuss.
me try to refresh. Okay, there we go.
Okay,
Okay.
there you go.
What on earth is all this? Um.
I don't know. Kind of looks like stamps.
Mhm. Annie Hayslip's sample album made 1880. It contains many samples of the dresses of friends and kindred, also many of the pieces accidentally saved and the dresses unknown.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, these are clothing or some kind of tags. See?
Oh,
The Utica non-perial shirt, reinforced registered image mark. Yeah, I guess these are, oh look, that's like a looks like a plastron.
that's cool.
Mm-hmm. Or a Dickie. Yeah, a Daisy shirt. Oh, look at that. That's cute. Okay. Interesting. Size 14 and a half. What's size 14? What is size 14 and a half and 18? Oh,
Could
look. I
that
just
be
realized.
could that be a size for a dress for a shirt though?
Could be because now look, it says Lewis.
Yeah.
Lewis. And
That's
these
probably that's probably a
Albert.
shirt size.
Yeah, Albert. So maybe these are shirts. So AWH would be Albert Hayslip. So yeah. Ooh, how cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and what was interesting to me is some of these fabrics are not all that interesting.
Mm-hmm.
They're not like what you would expect of, I mean, what we are going to
Well,
assume.
so I've got a question here, and you might know the answer to this because you know more about dress history than I do.
Hmm.
So that page there where you were like, some of these are not all that interesting. When collecting swatches of something that like, dress fabrics,
Hmm.
would you only collect the outside fabric? Like some of the ones that are more boring, could those be linings? Do you think? Like,
Could
would you
be.
have collected something like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it depends on why you're collecting. Are you collecting because you want to save all the fabrics that you've worked with? Then yeah,
Hmm.
you might save linings and things like that. But if you're just collecting to show off pretty fabrics, then I don't know.
Well,
These just look like men's pants fabric or something. Like
oh
it's
yeah, they could be. Yeah. Oh, if I should, but I was just thinking, like, in those instances, excuse me, where a lining is not just like what did they usually use? Like, was it like a lesser silk or something sometimes for linings?
Actually, it depends. So for instance, like this time period, so like a bodice would be
Hmm.
interlined. So
Hmm.
imagine all of the pieces then would have a second piece of fabric behind them that would have been kind of like what we would say like a muslin.
Hmm.
And then you might have a lining. And linings were sometimes they were a glazed cotton. Sometimes they were just scrap cotton. It's not going to be a silky lining like what you think of, say, in a ladies like ladies business wear, like a lining in a
Hmm.
skirt. That's
Hmm.
not what they lined with.
Well, I was just thinking like a couple of instances where I've come across historic clothing in an antique show or something, And sometimes a lining I would see would just be like a shirting print because it's
Hmm.
probably just what they had left over of something.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, I'm thinking like how many instances are there like of that where it might make sense to save a piece of the lining because it's easily quote like an outside type
Hmm.
fabric.
Sure, yeah.
Could that account for some of the
Could be, yeah.
boringness?
Could be, yeah. What I was gonna say about these though, and I mean, let's see. These just look like,
Yeah, that looks like suiting.
yeah, I mean they're kind of a, yeah, it does. It looks like, I don't know. It doesn't look like
Some of it
anything
could be like, I
particularly.
wonder if those are cloaks. Could be cloaks.
But it's almost like she went around trying to find, every color of khaki pants she could or something. I don't know.
Well, that's
Um,
another thing that makes me think it's men's suiting.
yeah, and I mean well, I mean these that have the holes in them is very likely wool
Mm-hmm.
for obvious reasons. These other ones look like they're probably some type of wool. Just by kind of looking at the little threads on the edge. And again, without touching them, it's really, really can be hard to tell. This up here looks like it could be linen, just because
Mm-hmm.
it's got that kind of um, as it was glued down, it was easily pulled out of square is what I'm trying to say. Whereas linen's like that, it's kind of wiggly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, like this kind of stuff, these kind of things could have been, used underneath, inside. Um, I mean, these are actually people's names though, so I'm guessing
Oh, there
these
are
were,
actually names there.
yeah, these on some of these, yes, I'm guessing these were
Mm-hmm.
actual dresses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mary, yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems like her goals may have been totally different than Anne Sykes. I don't know. And to me, she's obviously trying to do like a rainbow situation here. She's trying to get like all of these darks
So it's
together. It
not
seems
really
like.
about chronological order for her.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't looked at these in detail, but I mean, gosh, this is the kind of these little shirtings and these tiny little ditzy prints. We see this all the time in
Mm-hmm.
quilts.
Yep.
Um, but it seems to me like she was trying to put them together in some kind of color, you know?
Mm-hmm.
She was trying to do this by color. Almost like if you have Ellen Trastain's book, I think here it is, my dating fabrics book. It almost reminds me of how
Eileen, isn't it Eileen
Eileen, I'm
Tristan?
sorry, yeah, Eileen
Mm-hmm.
Trastain. It's almost reminds me of how she she puts together.
Yep.
Um, in fact, let's see. Here's 1860 to 1880. I realize that we're tiny right now, but I mean these fabrics are like the magenta and reds of this
Yep.
book. Looks just like that page, you know. I mean,
Yep.
so I mean to me that she was doing this woman was doing something with color. I think. This is amazing. I gotta tell you, this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad you found this. I can't wait to sort of pour over this. Um, and I'm just like seeing things that I know I've seen in quilts or in my own
Yep.
quilts. It's so
Lots of stuff
exciting.
here that I see. Oh God, plaids. I
Yeah,
love plaids.
yeah.
But
So,
yeah, it just goes, oh, there's those greens. Wait, go back to
mhm.
those greens. Zoom in on those. I want to see if they're
Here.
um what happened to them? Where'd they go?
Did I
There we
scroll
no oh,
these
oh,
these
oh.
greens?
Yes. Yeah, do we got our Pennsylvania ones in there? There's that green and yellow.
Fabrics we have known.
Mhm.
Fabrics we have known. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, look at this. How often do we see this little green and black print, and now you see a whole bunch of them together? You're like, oh yeah, they really do look different yet similar. And we've
Mhm.
definitely seen some
And
of these over and
and
over.
how, because this has been sitting in a book like this and hasn't seen daylight, how awesome is the vibrancy of these colors? Because
Yes.
these green prints, I feel like one of the things, well, one of the privileges of having seen so many of those green prints in Pennsylvania quilts is we've gotten to see a lot of how they wear in terms of like how they
Hmm.
fade and things like that. So seeing them kind of more of like a true color,
Yeah. It's funny.
is
This
really
this
pretty.
quilt I have this this one. It's a reproduction. I mean, they're all reproduction fabrics. It was probably made in what, the 70s or 80s. But yeah, I'm seeing there's a green up here that is a reproduction of one of these. Similar to one of these like this. So,
But yeah, this just goes to show you, like, it's so weird. As soon as we start talking about something, we start reading about something, these resources just, like, this literally fell right into my lap. I didn't do any work. So when you're
well,
like that,
and
I found this, I just used eyeballs on social media one day, and like here it came. Just out
well,
and I don't know if maybe that's because I don't remember off the top of my head who had shared it, but if they happen to be a lurker, that's, in the background reading with us and doesn't necessarily comment because it wasn't somebody that's one of the usual suspects in here. But yeah, these stuff just seem to like pop. Ooh, look at that. A
yeah.
swatch.
So I scrolled down and this. Oh, look, it's a quilt. Yeah, I
Oh
looked
yeah.
in here and there are
Other
some of
things.
these things are just albums. But yeah, so like a swatch book of figured velvets and brocaded silks. My guess is this is probably a
Hmm.
manufacturer's book. But
Oh.
look at that. And of course, they only have 2 images, but
Well, I
um
think one of the big deals, because that book that you're looking at is from the 1700s. I think one of the things here, and one of the reasons, wow, look at that. Um,
and this is
that
definitely
first,
manufacturers.
I think one of the reasons that first book was such a big deal and people were sharing it is that Colonial Williamsburg is starting to digitize these. And if you recall, I know you guys have heard us talk about the swatch books like our friend Mia
Hmm.
has, and you've met Mia.
I
She
kept
we had her
thinking about
here.
Mia's book. That's all I could
Yep.
think about while I was reading was
We
Mia's book.
we had Mia on here for an interview when we did our little watch party of her episode on Quilts in a Material World by AQSG. And we had talked about how she had bought a couple of huge swatch books in an auction. And I mean,
Yeah.
like expensive. She invested in these tomes. And
Yes.
they are, Stephanie and I have seen them in person.
Hmm.
They're incredible. And part of the question now, oh my God, I love that blue. Part of the question now is the plan for stuff like this, and we had asked her, oh my God, those little acorns, if she was planning on digitizing, and I think that is one of her big plans. But it's an undertaking. Like
Hmm.
for something like this, you got to take pictures of every single page, and this one's not too
Yeah.
bad. But that other book there, that one that only had one page, that thing looks like it's a few hundred pages.
Yeah, and you know what?
Yeah.
One of the problems with digitizing is simply that sometimes, like, I mean, if I'm gonna take, well, luckily this is a spiral bound book. If I'm gonna, want to make a copy of this, I have to, lay it down flat. Well, it's spiral bound. That's great. These things are spiral bound, and if you open them like more than this, they start crumbling and falling apart, and the spine breaks. So you have to be
Well,
really
and then if you
careful.
use one of those book,
Yeah,
um,
the book cradle.
yeah,
Yeah,
it doesn't open sometimes wide
right.
enough to
Yeah.
get enough light in as just as
Hmm.
well. You need more equipment. It's just a pain. It takes
It
time, it
is.
takes
Yeah.
money. Um, but I'm so here for things like this because even,
That.
Kate here, our book author, Steph and I before the stream were talking about how, I really wish that she has some pictures from the book in here, from her, the book in her possession. And I was like, well, I wish there was more because she mentions there's like 400 pages or something in that book.
Hmm.
And there's probably very good reason why there aren't currently more pages in here. But I really hope, seeing how rare completed tomes like this are, that
Hmm.
becomes digitized, because even if we can't see them in person, I mean, these photographs are fabulous.
Yeah,
Like, and
they
look how
did.
many,
Yeah.
like Steph, in the front page of this where it talks about provenance and all that, do you remember if it mentions how many pages there are?
Oh, you're talking about the main.
Yeah, like the description page.
See if I can get that to come back up. I may have to.
I mean, I can probably, I can just look at it myself on the back here. Let's
So the
see.
um, donor informed Janaea Whitaker of the millinery shop that he purchased the album book at a flea market at the Rose Bowl in California. Oh my God. And so back in the day, I don't know about now, but the Rose Bowl flea market, oh my God, that was like a wonderland of textiles and, I mean, anything and everything you can think of. Piles of crap, but also piles of good stuff.
Well,
um,
also in the description it says it contains 174 pages
oh,
with
yes.
over 3,000 textile swatches.
Wow. Okay, so this is even more than Anne Sykes, but it doesn't look like this one necessarily has as much data other than some names and dates.
Yeah, I feel like the content isn't as consistent.
286 unique names.
Wow. So actually, this is more involved then
Mm-hmm.
than Anne because Anne only has about 100.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see here. Go ahead and keep scrolling there, whatever. I'm just looking at something else. So
Yeah.
Anne's has 2,000 pieces of fabric.
Mm-hmm.
Hers has more than 100 names.
So this is interesting. This is textiles from Kentucky and Texas. So that must have been where this person, Annie Hayslip. So she must have lived in Kentucky and Texas.
Hmm.
So
And I love how when they give the dimensions, they say thick.
well, it is. I mean,
I
so
know, but I just went thick.
but like this thing is like that thick. That's pretty thick book. And
They
I
actually
mean,
got to
it's a pretty
digitizing
big
this
book.
pretty quickly because their object number says it's from 2016. So, I mean, less than 10 years for them to.
Yeah, this is a very cool book though. When I saw that you found this, I was like, ooh. And I think I've looked at some in other places, but it's been a very long time. And I just couldn't stop thinking about Mia's book. Now I realize
Yeah.
Mia's book is a different time period. We've got a lot of 20th century in her book,
Mhm.
but her book. I mean, I don't know if I feel like she told us how many pieces of fabric are in it. I mean, it's up there. It's in the thousands. Um,
I don't even know that she actually has
yeah, I
been
can't.
able to count
I can't.
herself. I think that she
Yeah.
might just taken that number from the auction listing.
Auction, yeah, but I mean her book is like crazy thick. It's big.
Well, remember, she
um
is more than one.
well, I'm thinking of that like really big thick one. I mean, I know she has other ones that are like if I remember it correctly, her other books are like manufacturers books.
No, she had two at the study center we were
Okay,
at.
then I'm
Remember?
forgetting.
It was
Yeah.
Barb. It was Barb and I
Mm-hmm.
forget who the other woman was that was that was flipping them.
Allowed to touch.
Yeah. But yeah, she's got a couple of
Okay,
really
I'm really
conquered.
remembering the one that's like really big and thick. I took pictures of that
Yes, there
one
was
in
one we were
particular.
more interested in than another because it had
Mm-hmm.
more cottons and another one
Mm-hmm.
had more other types of fabric.
Fancy fabrics, I
Um,
guess. Yeah.
yeah, but I don't recall, and I could be totally wrong because like I think we saw just a few pages of them, but I don't recall hers having a lot of annotation in them.
Mm-mm, it didn't, and that's I think when I was looking at hers, that's kind of what made me I don't not sad necessarily, but that's probably the wrong word, but just kind of disappointed because I'm like, oh, I want to know about the person that did this. I would love to meet her. I'd love to talk to her and like show me your favorite fabric in here. Why did you do this?
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
yeah. So
Yeah. Well, given because yeah, since that thing has like 100 something pages, we can definitely look at it again on
hmm
another night. Because like I said, I had grabbed that just to have it ready
yeah,
because when you're starting a book, sometimes it's like you feel like you might not have enough to talk about
oh,
for
I
an
think we've
hour and
got
a half.
enough.
Well, we clearly did because we went all the way till 8 before we even opened that. But then I hadn't even scrolled down to that like similar items thing.
hmm
So not even realizing that Colonial Williamsburg has some other very interesting things. And
Yeah, yeah.
that's just one institution.
hmm hmm
So that'll have to lead the way to looking
Let's
and
find some
seeing,
more to look at.
yeah, what
Yeah,
some other places. Well, because I mean, like even in here, she's mentioned a couple of times like the V&A. And I know that they have quite a lot of things online.
yeah,
So, but yeah, by all means, everybody, if poke around yourselves, if you find something interesting that you want us to show we
yeah.
will definitely
It
do
definitely. I mean,
that.
yeah. Look for this stuff. Look for stuff from this era because as she talks about things, we can look at. We don't have to look at her book to be able to identify what she's talking about, or to get some idea of what she's talking about. So
all the supplemental stuffs.
all the things.
But yeah, also this was, for anyone that was wondering, like maybe do we like 7? This is the reason to do 7 is because it's now 8:40. Because we know that it is very likely that we can go over time discussing this stuff, especially, when you're getting into things here that have to do with that broader context of fabrics and mills and history and all that jazz. But like,
And some of us just, again, get enthusiastic about all the things. So
all the things. So as a reminder here, as we wind down for next week, we're going to do chapters 2 and 3, which is pages 35 through 63.
And your homework shall be to find more of these books and things out there, or even the manufacturer swatch books. This will be fun to look at too from this time period.
All that stuff. I mean, this is we're going to do some mill history, it looks like, in here. Some other, she mentions that magazine, that Women's Domestic Life. I've never even heard of that magazine.
Yeah, it was a British magazine, I think.
Yeah, if you find one of those, and let's digitize, and let's look at one of those and what they were looking at and stuff like that. There's possibilities are endless.
And of course, there's always Godey's. Might have an issue or two of that.
And then, if you want more about the actual textile history part, remember that Steph is reading Heritage of Cotton, which I have.
Do you have your fancy copy?
Fancy copy of.
Your fancy copy. Mine looks like a pile of junk compared to yours.
Well, to be fair, the spine does not look pretty because of, fabric fading. But yeah, this is a fabric covered book.
I'm so fascinated, how and why?
Just to look pretty, I guess.
But I mean, does that signify a first edition, or was that just an option? I'm surprised when I see something like that because, granted, you often don't know what the book itself looks like if it has a dust jacket. Mine has the sad remnants of a dust jacket, but mine is definitely not a pretty, this is
what's the copyright on yours?
It's 1924.
Mine is 2.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess that could be a first edition, and this is...
Doesn't say. I've never done any research into fabric covered books. I grabbed this when we were at the last pet and dry goods market just because I was like, that's a really pretty fabric covered book.
And then when you told Julia how I was going to try and steal it from you, and then she gave us this copy, so I'm very, very grateful to her for this copy.
Are your pages rough?
My pages?
My pages on the spine here have roughness to them.
Yeah, it's the way the books are cut open.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
just asking.
Yeah.
Don't judge me.
Well, I guess we will see you guys next Tuesday, unless you're joining me on Thursday for my stream. Will you be there, Jill?
Are we gonna do our thing? Oh no, wait, I can't.
Okay.
I can't. I'll be on my way up to Maine.
Ah, that's right. I never asked you. I forgot. Okay. Well, I guess we're going to have to do Am I the A-Hole another time. So
we can do it, I guess, next week when I get back because I'm only up to Maine till Sunday.
Yeah, we can do that.
And I'll need to know if I'm the A-Hole at that point, probably.
All right, guys. Have a great evening, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Mwah, mwah, mwah.